Hello, everyone. I'm Jerry Ward. I'm a Hispanic woman with medium complexion, shoulder length brown hair. I have brown eyes, and I am wearing today blue rimmed glasses. I am wearing a grayish color blouse, um, and let's see, no jewelry today. Okay, Social Security and overpayments. Next slide. This session is to provide you with general information only. Please do not share your personal information or questions during this training. This document is funded through a Social Security grant. Although Social Security reviewed this document for accuracy, it does not constitute an official Social Security publication. This communication is printed, published, or produced and disseminated at U.S. taxpayer expense. Disability Rights DRC is the agency designated under federal law to protect and advocate for the rights of Californians with disabilities. We work in litigation, legal representation, advocacy services, investigations, public policy, and provide information, advice, referral, and community outreach. For more than 45 years, DRC has worked to advance the rights of Californians with disabilities in education, employment, independence, health and safety, and has grown into the largest disability rights organization in the nation. Next slide. So what's PABS? Protection and Advocacy for Beneficiaries of Social Security, PABS. The Social Security Administration, SSA, funds the program Protection and Advocacy for Beneficiaries of Social Security, again, PABS. The PABS program is established as one of the 57 protection and advocacy PNA agencies in every state of the District of Columbia, in every state, the District of Columbia, and U.S. territories. Next slide. Purpose of PABS: to provide information and advice to Social Security beneficiaries with disabilities about obtaining vocational rehabilitation and employment services, to provide advocacy and other services that a beneficiary needs to secure, maintain, or regain full employment, to provide assistance in work-related overpayments that are a barrier to employment. A major concern of SSI and SSDI beneficiaries who want to work is the fear of losing benefits and health care. And as Mr. Johnson described, receiving those envelopes, right, from Social Security. We want to eliminate that fear. We want to be able to go out into the community, provide information on Social Security benefits, so that people are not afraid to attempt or return to work. We help individuals understand how work impacts SSI, SSDI benefits, and how work incentives are applied. We provide information regarding DOR services and how to apply for those services. We provide information regarding employment. When applying for a job, what an employer can and cannot ask. What should be on an application? We provide information regarding reasonable accommodation if an individual needs an accommodation while they are going through the interview process. We also assist and advise individuals in the process of how to request an accommodation if it's needed while working. Next slide. Today I will be talking about Social Security and SSI overpayments. I think we can all agree that overpayments are scary. They're stressful to an individual who's been assessed an overpayment. Next slide. What causes an overpayment? There's common overpayments. For SSI recipients, Supplemental Security Income or SSI recipients over resources. An SSI recipient has a resource limit of $2,000. If they're married, they have a $3,000 resource limit. Work, wages from work. That's a common overpayment. In-kind support and maintenance, known as ISM. The most common ISM is not paying their fair share of rent. So we do get those calls. Social Security disability income, SSI benefits, SSDI benefits. Common is wages from work. Workers' compensation or state disability insurance. Social Security may not have factored in workers' compensation or state disability insurance when they determine the SSDI amount a person is entitled to receive. Retirement pensions. An individual should report a pension to Social Security. Not every pension will affect benefits. Next slide. Overpayment notices. Explanation of the overpayment. It is so important to review the overpayment notice. I know it's scary, but it's important to read the overpayment notice. Does the notice explain how the overpayment happened? The overpayment notice should have an explanation as to what caused the overpayment, the dates of when the overpayment occurred. Does the notice show how SSA calculated the overpayment? They should include information. For work-related overpayments, the SSI program will include the overpayment notice in the overpayment notice, the monthly calculation worksheet. I think Mr. Johnson said it would be really thick. His notice, he knew that there was a problem with his notice, if his envelope was really thick from the Social Security Administration. That's because they should be putting a calculation worksheet for SSI recipients. The worksheet will have the gross monthly earnings, income, unearned income, disregards, and the 1/2 deduction used to determine the SSI benefit amount. So this worksheet contains all the information that is needed to determine how much benefit a person would be entitled to receive. If there are several months of an overpayment, the SSI program will include a calculation worksheet for every month there is an overpayment. Review the worksheets. Make sure that the gross income is correct and there's no mistakes. The SSDI program will send out a notice of proposed decision. The notice will have information about potential overpayment months and can include names of employers. The notice of proposed decision is a quick turnaround, and it has like a 10-day limit on it for a person to respond. After contacting SSA and providing SSA with the information they are requesting, SSA will issue a notice of a revised decision or a notice of a disability cessation, meaning that now that the proposed decision is the starting point, and then you have you may have a revision of the overpayment, or you have a disability cessation, which is indicating you may not be eligible for benefits.
I'm so sorry to interrupt, Jerry, but the slides may not be moving aligned with your presentation. So let's just make sure we're on the right slide.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yes. So overpayment notices is what we have.
Okay, perfect.
Right. So the right to I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I kind of got sidetracked. Oh, so we were talking about, does the notice show the calculation, the right to appeal, is where I was getting. So with, an SSDI, notice, overpayment notice, it begins with the notice of a proposed decision. Once Social Security has the information that they may need, they can change their mind, so to speak, and they'll have a notice of a revised decision. It could be a notice of disability cessation, meaning benefits are stopping. The notice will also indicate the months of the overpayment and when the overpayment occurred. So these are things that you need to look at in the overpayment notices. You have the right to appeal within 60 days unless there's good cause and filing a late appeal. An appeal is referred to, when they refer to an appeal, that's a request for reconsideration. An example of good cause might be that you never received the notice, there was a problem with mail delivery, you reported a move to Social Security, and Social Security may not have entered the change of address. The waiver of an overpayment recovery, a waiver of overpayment recovery does not have any timeline. There is no timeline to file a waiver. I will be going into explanation of a request for reconsideration and a waiver of overpayment recovery in a little bit further down in this presentation. Next slide. So is the overpayment correct? Did Social Security include work incentives? Make sure your records are up to date and you're reporting properly. Okay. SSI. We talked about the calculation worksheet. Carefully review the calculation worksheet. Is the amount of gross income that they are using, is that correct? Did Social Security include what we call impairment-related work expenses? Employment-related work expenses are, it's an expense that an individual may have in order to be able to work. This will be their own actual cost. They paid for it. It's not reimbursed by Medi-Cal, Medicare, or some other type of insurance. It's their actual out-of-pocket expense. You also have to have receipts. If you are indicating that you have impairment-related work expenses, you must show that you paid for that particular expense. Blind work expenses. Blind work expenses, or BWEs, only applies to the SSI program. A BWE does not have to be related to blindness. BWEs include a deduction of federal, state, and local income taxes and other deductions. So BWEs is very different from impairment-related work expense. If you are a person with blindness, you want to use BWEs because there's a larger deduction when you use your BWEs versus impairment-related work expenses. SSDI. You want to look at the notice. You want to make sure that the trial work period, the extended period of eligibility are correct. There has been situations where Social Security, there was a trial work period, but there was certain times when the trial work period should not have applied. So you really want to make sure that the trial work period, if listed on, should be listed and should indicate what months were used as a trial work period. Other work incentives are unsuccessful work attempt. The unsuccessful work attempt can be applied after a trial work period if an individual is unable to continue working due to a disability or reduction of work due to a disability. So in other words, they could still be working at the same place, but they could be perhaps an example would be they were working, they went to another promotion maybe, and they're making a little bit more money. It's determined that they're not able to do the job duties that are required, and they asked to be for their old job back, and their income is dropped. So that could be used as an unsuccessful work attempt. It will depend on how many months they were working, and whether or not unsuccessful work attempt can be applied. Social Security will also do income averaging. So if a person has various wages month to month, there could be an income averaging to determine whether or not they worked over substantial gainful activity, SGA. There's also a work incentive called subsidies and special conditions. A subsidy is support provided by an employer that may result in receiving more pay than the actual value of services performed. Special conditions is when an individual has received or is receiving job coaching. Although the job coaching may not be their out-of-pocket expense, they can have the job coaching costs reduced from the gross monthly income. And a job coach can be provided by Department of Rehabilitation or a regional center. Impairment-related work expenses also apply to the SSDI program. As stated above, these are always are out-of-pocket expenses that are needed in order to work, and you have to have the verification of the cost. I think we're, hold on a second. Next slide, please. So let's go over when it's appropriate to file a request for reconsideration. We talked about impairment-related work expenses, deductions that can be, that can possibly reduce your overpayment. If you get the overpayment notice, make sure again that you're reviewing your overpayment. Is overpayment correct? Is there any impairment-related work expenses that were not considered that should have been considered? Okay. So let's go over when it's appropriate to file that request for reconsideration. Next slide. Not in agreement with the overpayment. Not in agreement with that an overpayment exists or that overpayment is incorrect. The result you want in filing a request for reconsideration is to delete or omit the overpayment or lower the overpayment as much as possible. Appeal the overpayment notice within the 60-day timeline. If it's over 60 days, you can still file an appeal, as I explained earlier, under good cause. And it could be again that you did not get the notice. There's problems with mail delivery, etc. Resubmit evidence of work incentives that SSA may have used when determining an overpayment. Always keep copies of what has been submitted to Social Security for your own records. Keep a binder with SSA information. When you receive a notice, staple the envelope to the back, 3-hole punch, and put that notice on top of the other notices that you have previously received. If you file anything, if you're filing an appeal, whatever you're submitting, make sure that you have copies of that and place that in your binder as well. So you always want to document. Submit new evidence of work incentives with the appeal. If you have impairment-related work expenses, if you have other information that will help to reduce or eliminate that overpayment, you want to submit that new evidence to Social Security. Include a cover letter explaining why there is no overpayment. On the SSA 561U2, which is the request for reconsideration form, you can write in the little box that they have. You can write, please see attached, please see attached. Okay, that can be placed in, I believe it's called the explanation box of the appeal, and you can, put your let them know that you're attaching that document. For SSI recipients, it's a little different. In that particular form, the SSA 651 has some three choices. It's a case review, informal conference, or formal conference. The SSDI beneficiaries don't have that option. So what they will be doing is submitting the form and waiting for a response from Social Security. Make sure to keep copy of, again, make sure to, keep that copy for your records. I suggest that you call Social Security Administration in a few weeks once that information has been submitted, and make sure they have that in their system, that it's been entered into the system. So overpayments are not uncommon if Social Security doesn't have the correct information. It's important to provide Social Security with the information they need to correct any errors. An example of a request for reconsideration when not in agreement that an overpayment exists. So here's my example. Mr. D contacted Disability Rights California, or DRC, after receiving a notice of proposed decision. Mr. D stated that he never worked for the company listed in the notice. He said he had been a victim of identity theft and had filed a police report when he found his identity had been stolen. The company listed in the proposed decision was contacted, and the company confirmed Mr. D was not an employee. Mr. D provided a statement from the company as well as a copy of the police report to the Social Security Administration. As a result, Social Security removed the overpayment from Mr. D's work record. Right? So in another case, an individual whose death contacted DRC because she had been issued an SSDI overpayment. We went over her notices and earnings. And during that conversation, we found that she was not, she wasn't aware of impairment-related work expenses, or the IRWs. So we went over her daily routine. She shared that she used a small handheld device to communicate with other staff. This is an individual who worked for a school and was assigned to various areas of the playground throughout the day. And using that device, they would let her know where she had to, which area of the playground she had to be at. She paid a monthly fee for the service of the device, and she also paid for certain medication that were not covered by Medicare. She filed a request for reconsideration, submitted her IRWs and evidence of her expenses, which brought her below substantial gainful activity. SSA determined she did not work over SGA, and the overpayment was deleted from the work record. So it's important to, it's important to go over these notices. When I'm doing interviews with clients, I want to, like I did with this individual, I walk through her daily routine. A lot of times individuals aren't aware that they have an IRWI or that they may have a subsidy that can help reduce their gross monthly income. So we had an individual Ms. R, who contacted DRC after she received a large SSDI overpayment due to wages. We reviewed Ms. D's notice, the date of when the overpayment began, when it ended. We looked at the amount of the SSDI she received and determined the amount of the overpayment was incorrect. So based on the notice, which had the information of when the overpayment occurred, the months that she was overpaid, and we looked at the calculation and found that it was incorrect. Ms. R filed a request for reconsideration regarding the amount of the overpayment and requested a recalculation of the overpayment. SSA determined there was an error and they reduced the overpayment amount. Ms. R was provided information regarding a request for waiver of overpayment recovery. Next slide. So let's talk about request for waiver of overpayment recovery. You know, the request for reconsideration, as we indicated, is an appeal if you're saying there's no overpayment exists, or the overpayment amount is incorrect. Then we're going to move over to the request for waiver of overpayment recovery. When is that filed? Okay. Next slide, please. So with the request for waiver of overpayment recovery, you're actually agreeing that an overpayment does exist. A waiver of overpayment recovery can be filed at any time. The first element of the waiver is whether you're at fault. So you, as an individual, will need to let Social Security know why you're not at fault in creating overpayment. Okay. Reported earnings to the SSI program or SSDI program and submitted the pay stubs every month. Received confirmation from Social Security that they received the pay stubs. In some situations, I have found that individuals are receiving periodically those letters that say, because of your earnings, we're increasing your Social Security. So they believed they were entitled to benefits. Other factors in determining not at fault, but was their understanding of work rules? Was there misinformation from an official source? So here it's important to document. Important to document conversations with Social Security. I called Social Security on July 18th and I spoke with Ms. Smith. I asked her this question and this is how she responded. So you always want to make sure that you're basically covering your bases, okay? You want to make sure that you're documenting. Again, keep that information in a binder in the event that you are, that you have an overpayment and you want to file a request for waiver of overpayment. You may have been misinformed by a Social Security representative. And now you have it documented. I contacted Mrs. Smith. I asked her this question, and this is how she responded. So you keep that information, keep it in a binder, and you may have several years of information in a binder, but keep it. It's so important. Let's talk. A recovery would defeat the purpose of the Social Security Act. It's an undue hardship. So undue hardship would be unable to pay the ordinary living expenses. Recovery would be against equity and good conscience. So you may be found not to be at fault, but Social Security determines that you actually have the means of paying this back. There is against equity and good conscience to recover the overpayment. So I'm going to go into some examples of when a waiver is filed. So on a tidbit of information here, you may or may not know that concurrent beneficiaries, meaning that an individual receives SSI and SSDI, must report to both SSI program and the SSDI program. Okay, so keep that in mind if you have a concurrent beneficiary or if you're an individual who's receiving both benefits. So we had Mr. J contact DRC. He receives SSI and SSDI. He called the Social Security office and asked the representative if his unemployment that he began receiving would affect his benefits. He was told no. He called us to see if the information he received was correct. We informed him that unemployment insurance benefit will not affect the SSDI benefits. However, it will count dollar per dollar against his SSI benefits. We had we let him know that he would have to report the unemployment benefits to the SSI program, and he will be having, we determined that he will have an overpayment. So we went over the SSA 632 request for waiver of overpayment recovery and explained how to complete the form. So here, Mr. J was provided information, probably incorrect information, because the person who was answering his question didn't realize that he was receiving both benefits, SSI and SSDI. They were looking at one screen. So if you are a person with, again, a concurrent beneficiary, you're dealing with concurrent beneficiaries, let them know that they need to report income to two programs. Okay, these are not crossover. They keep their, I always describe this as keeping the zookeeper, does that keep the alligators and the giraffes in the same, the same enclosure, right? So you want to make sure that the reports are being made to each program. In another example, we received a call from Miss C and her mom, who's a representative payee, regarding an SSDI overpayment. In response to the overpayment, mom had already filed a waiver and had an upcoming personal conference scheduled to talk about the overpayment. Mom did not understand how the overpayment happened when she always reported income to the SSI program. And we explained to Ms. C and her mom that SSI and SSDI are not crossover programs. And because she was reporting income to the SSI program, the reported earnings are in the SSI file. We advised mom to request, that when she attended the personal conference to request the representative review the SSI work file. And the SSI representative the SSA representative conducting the personal conference reviewed the SSI file and found that mom had reported earnings every month and they had been verified. As a result, the SSDI overpayment was waived. Okay. So you always, again, when talking to SSI, if you're concurrent, let them know that you're getting SSDI. If you're doing, if you're talking to an SSDI person, just let them know you're getting SSI. So it's vice versa, right? Next slide. So Social Security does have what's called an administrative waiver tolerance. The SSA will waive an overpayment if they're not at fault and if the overpayment is less than $2,000. Now, this is a recent change that came down the pike with Social Security. That amount had been $1,000. It was recently raised to $2,000. The waiver of tolerance is not applied when an individual has reduced the overpayment below the $2,000. For example, if you have a $3,000 overpayment, you've been paying on it, and for some time, and now it's below that $2,000, well, Social Security will not accept a request for the administrative waiver because it was over, it was at that higher amount. Down the pike, when COVID occurred, we know that a lot of people had been reporting their earnings to Social Security. Problem was that people weren't working in the office, right? So a lot of the folks who were reporting their income didn't realize that they may not have been processing the reported income. So Social Security came up with what was called streamlined waivers. And the streamlined waivers apply from March 2000 to September 2000. So there's not a really big window, but if it will help reduce the overpayment, they can do the streamlined waiver. Next slide. Repaying an overpayment. So an SSI recipient can reduce, have their benefits reduced by 10%. SSDI beneficiaries just recently have a reduction of 10% or $10, whichever is greater. And negotiating overpayment. Okay, that's an SSA 634 request for change in overpayment recovery. So even if an SSI recipient has 10% taken out, that could be as much as $100, right, out of their SSI. If they cannot afford to have that $100, they can contact Social Security and negotiate a lesser amount. And the same with SSDI beneficiaries. If their reduction of the 10% would cause an undue hardship, it's too much money, they have to pay for their ordinary expenses, they can negotiate a repayment amount. There's also something called a compromise payment. The compromise payment, this is when an individual has been overpaid and is willing to repay, but a lesser amount. Next slide. So as I indicated in the previous slide, there has been changes to the Title II, or I'm sorry, SSDI overpayments. It went into effect in March. They are reducing benefits to the 10%. Now, Social Security in the past had been recovering in situations, recovered all of the SSDI benefit check. I mean, that created unfortunately, people were becoming homeless, couldn't pay for their ordinary living expenses, and they didn't know that they could negotiate a repayment amount. So these changes came down the pike recently. Next slide. For the SSDI folks, they expanded some of the changes. They expanded from 36 months. Social Security would try and recoup the SSDI overpayment within 36 months. That now went to a 60-month period. Again, it's still negotiable, okay? And it's easier to lower the repayment amount without having to provide financial. So Social Security, what they're doing now is reducing these overpayments. Hold on one moment. They're reducing overpayments. There's some timelines like in July. They were hoping to have people who had been paying greater than that 10% to where their benefits would now be reduced. The overpayment repayment amount would be reduced to that 10%. Sorry, I know we're running out of time here. Next slide. So again, Disability Rights California, our website is on this PowerPoint slide. Our pre-intake, we ask that people contact our pre-intake. Those hours are Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday from 9 to 3. They are closed on Wednesdays.
That's great, Jerry. Thank you so much Very informative presentation. Really, the details you've provided have been so invaluable just in helping us to understand why the overpayments may occur, and especially what steps we can take to deal with them. I know when I first started working in this field, I had no idea there was an administrative waiver. So I'm hoping some of our listeners are able to kind of take advantage of that. Thank you again for taking the time to join us today. I'm just curious, out of all the information that you presented today, what is the most important takeaway you hope everyone will remember?
Report.
Report. Document.
That's correct. I always say if you have taken one thing from this presentation, then I've done my job.
Yeah, excellent. I would agree with that wholeheartedly, but you obviously presented a lot more than one thing. So really appreciate you being here again. We look forward to working with you in the future. You guys have a great day.